We're going to talk about energy security, resilience, security in general, and I love the sort of the makeup of this conversation. We have on one hand the Chief Information Officer for Command Control and Communications and Cyber Directorate for PACOM, the U.S. Pacific Command, and a legendary game developer and entrepreneur and the CEO of Blue Planet Energy, and just a great leader in environmental, everything environmental here in the islands. Resilience is one of these words that gets used seemingly a lot more these days than before. I'm not sure that everybody is on the same page of what it actually means. Randy, start, what does resilience mean at PACOM?
Well, I think the reason why resiliency is used more and more is because it's more and more important. As we depend more and more on information systems, on interconnected systems, those systems have to operate in many different situations. Many situations are pretty harsh. So resiliency is the ability of a system to be able to continue to operate and continue to do its function in almost any condition. You can't just expect there to be, nice, calm conditions all the time. We have storms, we have disasters. And so resiliency is the ability for that system or service or whatever to keep operating and perform that function. And so it requires a lot of design and pre-planning in order to ensure systems are resilient.
Or as my retired Marine friend Mark Mickleby says, it's the ability to take a gut punch and come back swinging.
Absolutely. In fact, the Marine Corps has something called adapt, improvise, and overcome, and that's a pretty good three terms for resiliency.
Yeah. Hank, resilience, what does that mean?
Yeah, so resilience, I come from a country where the Netherlands, which is about a third of it's below sea level. Resilience is the ability to get through a natural disaster and come back and then rebuild in a way that the next time you have a natural disaster, it doesn't damage you as much as the last one did. So resilience is not just about the ability to recover, it's about the way that you recover. You recover in a way that you're stronger the next time. And with sea level rise and with these king tides, I think king tides are going to be the norm. And
explain what a king tide is for those who don't know.
So if you have the combination of the sun and the moon pulling at the ocean at the same time, then you get an extreme high tide. If you combine that with sea level rise, high tides, or the highest tides are going to get higher and higher and higher. And
you add a storm into that.
And you add a storm into that, a low pressure center. If you put a low pressure center, that rises sea level even more. And that's what happened in Holland in 1953, and about a quarter of the Netherlands was underwater. And it isn't something that needs to be solved with sandbags, because you're going to have sandbags there all the time. You need to have a much more permanent solution. And Hawaii needs to wake up to the fact that these things are not going to be exceptional. They're going to be the norm going forward. And the other side of it is like superstorms. I mean, with Sandy, in the South Pacific, we had the big typhoon that never happened before. These places are not prepared because they're getting hit with the 1,000-year storm every couple of years. Yeah. And again, we have to build systems, power, whatever, so that we can come back from those kinds of situations.
Right. And it's not just the hard infrastructure. Randy, you work on cybersecurity, big part of resilience. And talk a little about how, from the PACOM Pacific Command perspective, you think about resilience there. Is that just for the military itself, or for the Hawaiian Islands, or for a larger area? What are you thinking about when you're thinking about cybersecurity at PACOM?
Well, cybersecurity and resiliency, one of the things we're thinking about is military forces and Pacific Command depend heavily on civilian infrastructure. And so we actually have an effort called, Pacific Security Support Strategy, in order to support where we can civilian industry, in order to provide power systems, any kind of information systems that the public provides, make sure that they are robust and can support storms or any kind of disaster, or be there when the military needs them. In fact, we have kind of four elements of resiliency. We try to kind of measure what makes it resilient, what is not resilient. One of the things we have is robustness. Robustness is the ability of a system to be just tough and handle any situation. For example, when you talk about robustness, a Honda Civic is not as robust as a Humvee, or a car is not as robust as a tank. And of course, we are in the business of defending the nation, and so we have to be there when the rest of industry, rest of commercial, or anyone else is not there. Industry depends on us, commercial education depends on us, so we want to create a situation that can continue to operate. So you have robustness, you have redundancy, you have dispersal, you have the ability to restore and then recover, as Henk just said, come back up to a normal situation. So as such, in any system that we look at, information systems, cybersecurity systems, we build that in. There's no single points of failure. We have undersea cable systems that are there to withstand a certain amount of strain. We ensure they're buried so that fishing lines don't drag against them. They're strong enough. Of course, nothing can withstand a big earthquake, but at least some of the standard, tugs of tides and ocean, those cable systems are there to
So all those things that you described about cybersecurity and resilience, really, by and large, around redundancy and depth and adaptability and things like that, really apply to resilience and infrastructure and all. Henk, what's the conversation about resilient infrastructure that should be taking place in Hawaii, and how much of it actually is?
Wow. Yeah. So there's been talk about tying the islands together with a cable, and literally trying to tie them together,
because would they float away? What is that for?
It's just for power and communications. I guess.
That kind of tie.
That kind of thing.
Right, you said cable, and I was like, okay.
So
hold on.
Yeah. So the issue with that is that those cables become single points of failure,
right.
And so if you are completely dependent on the power coming from a neighbor island and you're all of a sudden cut off, now you're having a problem. The solutions that I like to see is first of all, island independence. And when I say islands independence, we have 26 days of fuel in the islands.
You mean a reserve on a typical?
Yeah, and so if the tanker stopped coming in 26 days, we're out of gas, so to speak. And this is in a situation where we can actually be producing most of that ourselves. 40% of the oil that we import goes to electricity, which is kind of ridiculous. Jet fuel, everybody says it's off the table when it should be on the table. And ground transportation, Norway is going to go 100% by 2045. We can completely switch our ground transportation by, as far as I'm concerned, 2025.
So how much of that conversation is taking place? Is this? I mean,
we are having the conversation now, and it's funny. The resistance is coming from strange places, like the auto industry. If the legislators around the world were to make a decision, we don't want internal combustion engines, then the auto industry would all pivot and make electric and hydrogen cars. We can generate electricity through wind, solar, geothermal here in the islands, and so there would be no problem. There would be no needed import for any of that. So for security issues for the military, for example, if they were to switch over to hydrogen and electric, then they wouldn't need to import. And when forward locations, to bring gasoline, diesel, and all that stuff to the forward location costs a fortune.
And costs lives, too.
And it costs lives, and they have to protect those supply lines when it could be generated locally. And this goes for every island in the world. Electricity needs to be generated locally. Every island has different resources. I don't think there's any island that doesn't have any resources.
Yeah.
And if the island doesn't have enough land, you can go offshore and do offshore wind or wave or whatever.
Yeah. So, Randy, we talk as we have been here at this event about resiliency in the context of sustainability. They've become not synonymous at all, although some people I think actually do conflate them a little bit. But the reality is that not everything that's sustainable is resilient, and not everything that's resilient is sustainable. And so there's a balancing act there in terms of how do you, I mean, we could, so for example, if everybody had a diesel generator on the premises, residential, commercial, then the grid going down wouldn't be so much of a problem. That's not very sustainable, not cost-wise and other things. How do you think about balancing that? Where do you see that? Is that a tension point that you have? And I'd love to hear from you as well, Henk, on this, in terms of how do you pit one against the other?
I don't know. I think that I do actually think sustainability is part of resiliency. It's just a longer term matter of it. If you're, if you have 30 days of fuel in a generator system, to support a headquarters, for example, if you have a power outage, okay, so yeah, you're resilient. You've taken care of that situation. So you've taken care of the initial fault, but you still have that issue of recoverability and sustainment. And so you have to still maintain the mission. So it's just, I would say, a slow motion. Maintaining sustainability is slow motion, maintaining resilience.
So you don't see a tension point?
I really don't see the tension.
Henk?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at them as being different either. Sustainable resilience is, we could say, the resilience of the human race living on this planet has everything to do with sustainability. If we don't learn how to live sustainable, then we're not going to be resilient. We're not going to be around. The planet will just get rid of us, like our speaker yesterday said.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit, because one of the technologies that is talked about by some as essential to a carbon-free energy world is nuclear. And Randy, you're a former nuclear engineer. I know you've thought a lot about this, and there's a whole new generation of smaller scale nuclear generation technologies. Should that be more of the conversation? That really hasn't come up so much this week at Verge Hawaii. Should that be?
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer in nuclear power, and I know that's I'm in a minority because nuclear power has got such a stigma. But you mentioned sustainability. Nuclear submarine can operate for 30 years without refueling. And in fact, it's basically the entire lifetime of the ship is built without having to refuel. Aircraft carriers all use reactors. So no, I'm a believer that with nuclear power, it can be made safe and sustainable. And I'm not, not an expert on this, but even with all renewables, with solar and wind, I'm not sure we can generate enough energy in order to replace the fossil fuels. But I think combined with nuclear, it can. And it's interesting, there are some new technologies in nuclear power that are struggling, and I don't know if they're struggling because they don't have the support. But for example, these pebble bed modular reactors, the fuel is actually in billiard ball size pellets, and the actual reactor itself is sort of a container, and you refuel by rotating these pellets. The moderator is gas, and then the gas is heated and it heats steam, and then from that point on, it's a normal generator.
There's no spent fuel, or there's no
if you lose cooling, the fuel cells are strong enough to maintain their integrity, so they wouldn't melt or anything. And I think there's a lot of promise to that. I know South Africa, China, and MIT has been working on that, but it hasn't reached the point where it can be publicly used.
Henk, I'm guessing you have a different view on this.
How did you guess? So I'm not a Luddite. I'm not afraid of technology, but I do know that there is this thing called Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, and more recently Fukushima. And specifically Fukushima, because it happened very recently, it feels like, and the Japanese people feel this very strongly, that the government and the utility has been lying to them about what actually happened there and what's going on consistently. And so the question is, what happens at the end of life of the utility? What happens to who takes care of all these reactors and all of the spent fuel rods? It may be a solution on some parts of the world, but if we're talking about an island, if something goes wrong, there is no way we can evacuate. Fukushima or Chernobyl, we can actually move away, but we have 800,000 people on this island. How long does it take us to get all those people out of here? And the answer is we can't. And so As far as island resiliency is concerned, I don't think this is a good solution unless you lend us a submarine and park it offshore. We can tow it away when when something hits a fan. I like the idea of encapsulating it in some structure that is not tied to the ground.
Well, is there, and I haven't really thought this through, but I'm sure some others have a nuclear submarine version of the electric vehicles serving as battery storage to the grid. Can you literally park a nuclear plant offshore?
Wow, that's interesting. But we literally, have reactors that we take, carry around the world in submarines and aircraft carriers. So perhaps there is something associated with that. You put a floatable reactor that it is offshore.
Yeah.
Now, then all of a sudden, how are you going to get the power onshore? So obviously, it has to be moored. But I think most of the effort should probably be put into containment facilities so that if something did happen, that any kind of radioactivity could be contained. So that's interesting, but I'm not sure as far as getting the power actually connected to the grid would be. In fact, what's interesting is during the Hurricane Iniki at Kauai, as you know, the Navy actually sent a submarine, USS Indianapolis, to Kauai to power the island, because the grid was totally destroyed. Well, not totally destroyed, but obviously they were out of power and very heavily damaged. We're never able to actually connect the submarine to the grid, plus the grid was too badly damaged to work. But at least we were considering doing that, and that option was there.
Hank, you were going to...
Yeah, no, first of all, I think that there's enough solar and wind to power the entire planet. I've heard, I don't know the facts, but that there isn't enough uranium in the world to power the world with uranium. So it isn't the final solution, no matter how we look at it. But we have a very strong regulatory environment in this country. And so we could theoretically say, yeah, we are doing a pretty good job of watching the nukes in this country. But you go to other countries, like what if they built nuclear power plants in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria? What do you do?
Yeah.
And then there are conflicts, and then these things become targets. I just as soon not have centralized, how can I say, targets.
Yeah.
And what happens when you have a wind spill or a solar spill? And the answer is absolutely nothing, because there's no such thing. Yeah. But oil spill and a nuclear spill are like disasters.
Isn't a wind spill kind of like a hurricane or something?
If you could provide enough solar for the whole world.
Can we have Randy's mic, bring that back up?
Nope.
Go ahead.
I'll just use his.
All right. Well,
Somebody's coming. Help is on the way.
is help on the way? Here's
There you go.
help is here. Let's see if we can get this.
Oh, get unplugged. There you go. Testing. I think you're on.
Okay.
And we're back.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we could provide the world with solar power, I'd be all for it. But I'm not sure we can. So.
Yeah. So, what keeps you guys up at night thinking in terms of security and resilience in Hawaii? Who wants to go first on that?
Well, I guess one of the big worries I do have is cyber hacking. Is an adversary, with enough malware in control systems to be able to take over control systems. One of the things, that I understand from Hawaiian Electric, they're not connected to the internet, and I think they have a very strong security posture. So, I mean, I don't really stay up at night thinking about Hawaiian Electric, but I do stay up at night thinking about other places that could be impacted as such. And by the way, all the power plants that I know of that have been intruded upon, hacked, are connected to the internet. So,
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that now, the potential to bring down the grid or a portion of it is becoming more and more real as we're seeing what's coming out of Russia and North Korea and, who knows, in whatever part of the United States this may be coming. But are we able to island it off, small island this off in terms of being able to just, because one part of the grid is like the internet, is that it's so interconnected by definition that if part of it goes, it all goes.
Yeah, I think we can. In fact, I think The internet is actually almost a convenience for lazy people who don't know how to connect. I'm being a little provocative here, who don't want to spend money on independent telecommunications. I think if we perhaps need a control and actuator telecommunication system like the internet that's dedicated to providing industrial control systems control, everything's encrypted so that there is no human beings that are operating and messing around in there. Everything on there has to be control signal. And so I think that would go a long way. And if we don't have one that's ubiquitously established, at least one established amongst partnerships of companies.
So using technology to take the human element out of grid security is what we want to do.
Right. I mean, our threats are natural threats. Our threats are, just technological material failure threats. But our biggest threats, frankly, are human being threats, who are folks who are out to do us harm.
I want to ask a question in a second, but Henk, what do you think?
Yeah, so, I believe the future of power, of energy, is distributed generation. If you have distributed generation, it's like if there are 1,000 places where we're generating instead of 2 or 1, then we wouldn't have the problem of having to protect that one. It's like don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And the more eggs you have, the less damage that any one of those eggs failing can cause. And if you interconnect the little microgrids and the power drivers in the different places, then it's just like borrowing sugar from your neighbor. If you run out of sugar, it's not that big of a deal.
And once you have eggs and sugar, then you're halfway to
then we have pancakes.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Sorry. Elaine, what do we got?
Yeah, so questions about, you were talking about cybersecurity and a number of other things in terms of integrating DERs more securely. So are you guys making any investments in blockchain technology? Or what are your thoughts on the blockchain?
I don't even know what that is. Blockchain technology?
It's a blockchain.
I've been hearing a lot about this, and it has to do with like Bitcoin, of being able to produce something that is not hackable. And because it's not hackable, basically it's secure. So your money is in virtual reality, and nobody can hack it. That kind of thing.
But it's also a way of ensuring transactions of any kind, including renewable energy purchases, even down to the neighbor-to-neighbor level, and ensuring the provenance of that if something is coming through that's supposed to be renewable, it probably is, and things like that.
It's interesting, but it's not our problem. Not my problem right now. What I'd like to see is people becoming more energy independent.
Yeah.
It's probably something for the electric company, but the electric company is connected to everybody, so they have to protect their system anyway.
Yeah, well, this is really, by definition, complex and multi-layered topic. I wish we could spend more time really digging into some of the specific solutions, but adaptability, redundancy, diversity, decentralization, whether it's of data or whether it's of energy, are the key words here, and how we get there and make sure that we've baked that into whatever energy plan we're creating for Hawaii or anywhere else is the critical.
I think what we need to do is look into the future. What is Hawaii going to look like 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now? Where is the sea level going to be? What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Right now, what we're talking about, the IPCC says minimum of a meter of rise in sea level by the end of the century. That's minimum.
Yeah.
And if we build for minimum, what happens when it's medium or maximum, which we haven't even figured that out.
Yeah.
I think we need to all work together. I mean, everybody, not just Hawaii, but everybody, to avert the tipping point of climate change. If it goes too far, then we could be talking about 30 feet rise in sea level. Where do we go?
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that. Bringing everyone together to have this conversation and to make sure that everyone's at the table, and how we think about that is one of the core themes of this event and of Hawaii's journey on the 100 to 100%. So all really important to do, but bringing resiliency into the conversation has got to be a critical part. Please join me in thanking Randy and Henk.